So, like I said, there are multiple safe ways to look at the eclipse. Pinhole viewer box is a fun project to try if, say, your kids want to have something to do with their hands, or if you like to build things. And we actually have one, like over there, that we built ourselves. We didn't build a big one that you stick your head in. We didn't think that was a great idea. But we did a nice long and narrow one, and it has a pinhole poked into that little piece of aluminum foil. That's just plain old aluminum foil taped onto the box, and then the other end of the box is sealed, and there's a hole cut in the side, a little visibility slot. So you point the thing at the sun, you point the foil into the sun, and you look in there, and you'll see a little image of the sun, about an inch across. The longer your tube, the bigger your image. But during a partial eclipse, you will see the crescent sun, you will see the partially eclipsed sun, and it's perfectly safe to look at a projected image of the sun. Sometimes you don't even have to make any kind of pinholes. Mother Nature seems to do a pretty good job of that too. Especially here in Oregon, where we have lots of trees. Just look on the ground or on the side of the house under a tree, and each little pinhole between the leaves will project a crescent image of this partially eclipsed sun. And then there's the colander effect. Here's a good example. I think it's made by one of these top high-tech polymer companies like Rubbermaid, I think. Anyway, it's just a matter of letting the sun shine through small holes, and you'll get small images of the sun. And if the moon is partly in front of it, you'll see that too. And if you have a Ritz or saltine crackers, those work too. Little tiny holes in them. So there's more to experience. There's a lot that goes on during eclipse. So it's not just the minute and a half or minute 40 of totality. There's things going on from start to finish. The temperature's going to go down. Well, imagine that. The sun's being covered up, so it's going to cool off. And again, this graph is from the 1999 Great European Eclipse. This was an observatory in England, and they charted the temperature. And you can see it was an August day, much like we're going to have this year. And the temperature goes up as the sun comes up, and as the moon covers it, it goes down. You can see at least 2 degrees centigrade of temperature drop. And then after totality, moon moves away, sun comes back up, and the air warms back up. You get back to your normal August sunny summer day. Animal behavior, as Mike mentioned, they will do whatever it is they do when it gets dark. And then when the eclipse ends, they will do whatever they do when it gets light. So I'm kind of curious. There's kind of a migration corridor in my backyard. I wonder which way the deer are going to be going. This is very interesting too. During the eclipse, very briefly, note the visibility of planets or stars during totality. As we said, the eclipse is about full moon brightness. So certainly with the full moon out, you can see planets and bright stars, and this is no exception. Except you'll be seeing them in the middle of the day, basically. So a unique situation and a unique opportunity. Venus will be very visible, fair ways above totality, and a couple other planets as well. But again, briefly, because it's less than 2 minutes. So this is a simulation of what it's going to look like during totality here in Corvallis. This is actually free software called Stellarium. I recommend it highly. I think it's really good. And as I mentioned, planets will become visible simply because they tend to be bright. You'll see Mars and Mercury, probably. Oh, I forgot to mention, the eclipse happens in Leo the lion. So you can see some zodiac constellations. You got Virgo, you got Cancer up here, and that's a sextant. That's called, the constellation is called Sextans. And guess what? Mercury is in Sextans. Go figure. You always thought Mercury was in one of the other zodiac constellations. No, not always. So, photography. And we did admonish those who are new to total solar eclipses to probably not try to image it. There will be a trillion images and videos of this eclipse on the internet very shortly after it ends. And in fact, the internet's probably going to break. Social media will probably break. Cell phone coverage, cell phone might be super saturated. I've heard people recommending that you rent satellite phones to bring in here if you need to call anybody. But anyway, I digress. Photography, we do teach, after having admonished you not to take pictures, we do teach photography class in partnership with OSU, and with a camera, all visual safety tips apply. So you need to have proper eclipse filtration, either for your eyes, well, for your equipment, for your photographic equipment. And what we're showing up here, this camera right here is a good example of an eclipse photography rig. You can see the filter on the top here. The owner of the camera built that filter during one of the classes. So all visual safety tips apply. You have to have filters for which means you have to have filters for every phase except for totality, which you want to make sure you take the filters off. And again, if this is your first one, experience it. And if you do decide to photograph it, practice. You need to practice, because it's not just like snapping pictures of your pets. For one thing, you need to know if your tripod can point your camera up 40 degrees above the horizon. I have one that won't. Monday morning on the 21st would be a bad time to find that out. So practice. You can practice on the moon, because it's about the same size as the sun, and will be about the same brightness as the solar corona. With the filter on, as you see there, practice on the sun. You don't have to wait for an eclipse. You can go outside and, I don't know if the sun's out right now, but you could go outside and practice right now if you wanted to. So the photograph here in the lower right, it was taken with a 28 millimeter lens, a wide angle lens, and this is getting into some of the better eclipse photography techniques. Particularly in astronomy, I've noticed a lot of astrophotography that involves a lot of foreground. I'm kind of old school. I'm focused on the object, and I don't care what's on Earth. But photography is also an art, and so you can include other elements in the scene to get some very impressive images. And again, this is a photograph of the very same camera that we have sitting up there. That blue tape is just to hold it on there kind of loosely. You don't want the wind to blow it off, for instance, while you're looking through the viewfinder. That could cause blindness. And you don't want somebody casually brushing by it and knocking it off. So the tape is just kind of a low adhesive to keep it on during the partial phases, but so that you can take it off easily for totality, because you're going to want no filters during totality. So there are two aspects to eclipse photography. One is the partial phase, where the moon covers less than 100% of the sun. And that's what that right or upper image is showing. And then there's totality, where the moon covers 100% or more of the sun. That's the lower image. So obviously we're talking about two different brightness regimes. So for cameras and lenses, probably the best rig, and a lot of us already have these, but a digital single lens reflex digital camera or a reasonable point and shoot camera is a possibility as well. But DSLRs work the best, I think. Phones have cameras in them now. That's just amazing. But they have very short focal lengths, so the sun will be small. It'll be a very small image. So even with digital zoom, but it's a wide angle, so you may get some foreground in it as well. Definitely use a tripod. Don't try to handhold any of this stuff. In fact, what I'm doing is all of my camera, well, two of my cameras, not all of my cameras, are going to be on tripods, and I'm going to pre-program them, and I'm going to push a button before totality starts. And if it all works, great. If it doesn't, I'm not going to worry about it. I want to watch the eclipse. After the eclipse, if everything went like it was supposed to, automation-wise, I'll have some great shots. Otherwise, I saw the eclipse. Set everything to manual mode. And this is the difficulty. You don't want the camera making your exposure or focus decisions for you, because it will inevitably get it wrong. You will want to focus manually. A good technique would be to, with the filter on, focus on the sun. Or if you have the filter off, focus on a distant cell phone tower or top of a tree, mountaintop far away. And once you've had it focused for infinity, basically, you want to leave it there. You might even tape it there. And then the same thing with exposures, f-stop and shutter speed, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that. As far as what lens to use, again, there's a whole pile out there. Kind of what we're emphasizing with the photography class is a lens between 50 and 200 millimeters. And actually some zoom lenses cover that whole range or more. But that seems to be one of the best ranges to use. So this image here on the lower right was taken with a 200 millimeter lens and with multiple exposures. You can see if you expose it at different lengths, you will get fainter and fainter details in the corona with the longer exposures. And then this was just put into, I guess, Photoshop and composited so that you end up with an image of very high dynamic range, where you can see the inner corona and prominences on the edge, but you can also see details all the way out to the outer corona. And this is, again, what a 200 millimeter lens looks like, directly photographing the sun. Yeah, there are a few sunspots here. Those are sunspots. It's not dirt on the sensor. So here's a 24 millimeter image, slightly wider angle. And if you note the size of the corona, it's over, well, maybe overexposed, you would say, but it's exposed for a long time to show the outer part. So it's a rather impressive looking swollen object there. And then to the left of it, you can see a planet. That's probably Venus, I would guess. And this is approximately how it would appear if you were using a phone in your camera in your smartphone. Now this is an interesting technique. This used to be devilishly difficult in the film days, but now with digital it's a lot easier. What was this? This was a 14 millimeter lens, is that right? Yeah. 14 millimeter lens. So you can see it's a very wide angle, but it caught all of the phases of the eclipse. Looks like almost from first contact to fourth contact. But you'll notice the one in the middle, there's no corona. Do you know why there's no corona on the one in the middle? Anyone? Too short? Anybody else? Have an answer? Okay. This is an annular eclipse. This is not a total eclipse. This was actually the annular eclipse, 2014 or 2012. 2012. Yeah, the annular eclipse in 2012. And this is probably in New Mexico. It looks like New Mexico. So the interesting thing about an annular eclipse is you have to use filters. You have to use eclipse glasses the whole time. There is no part of an annular eclipse, because basically it's just a glorified partial eclipse. There's no part of an eclipse like that that is safe to view without the glasses. Yeah, 14 millimeter lens, multiple exposures, composited together. So we're not going to make you memorize this table in order to get your eclipse glasses. And this is just an example. We're just tantalizing those of you who really want to take an eclipse class and learn how to take real pictures. And so we have suggestions, how to expose for the partial phases with the solar filter, for instance. So here's a starting point, f8, 1/500th of a second. Set your camera to ISO 100. And then bracket from there. Go above and go below as well, because you're never really sure exactly how bright it's going to be. If there's the slightest bit of cloudiness, I mean, that could cut out half of your light. You'd have to compensate for that. So bracket, if you will. So here's a summary for what exposures to try during the eclipse for partial phases. Again, 1/500th of a second at f8. Bracket by at least one plus or minus one stop. I have a camera that will do 9 stops, so that's what I'm doing. And then for totality, of course, let me not forget that for the partial phases, this is with the filter on the camera, on the front of the camera, like we have over here. But for totality, you want to take the filter off, and then you can start photographing for different parts of it. The easiest part's the inner corona because it's the brightest. That was what you were seeing on my picture from Cabo San Lucas. And the prominences are also bright enough that a relatively short exposure could bring this out very well. Again, slightly different recommendation of more exposure even without the filter, f5.6, 1/125th of a second. And then if you use an intervalometer, that makes it a lot easier. One of my DSLRs has a built-in intervalometer, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to program it ahead of time, turn it on, and walk away from it, and let it do its thing. You can buy aftermarket intervalometers. I guess they're fairly cheap. Most DSLRs will accept some sort of remote shutter release, and we do recommend you use that rather than touching the shutter release on the camera because you're on a tripod and it might shake it. An intervalometer will basically automate a lot of what you're trying to do. And again, practice on any clear day. And the full sun exposures will be the same as partially eclipsed sun, because the solar photosphere, as it's called, is of fairly uniform brightness. And so the exposures in a camera are not going to be any different. And this I learned the hard way. If it becomes overwhelming, if the equipment is not doing what you expect it to, if you think you're spending too much time with it, just stop taking pictures and watch the eclipse. It'll be 601 years before you'll see another one from here. All right, websites to check out. Those of you that are carrying smartphones with cameras may wish to image this slide. I'll go ahead and leave it up for a minute. But these are all good websites that we have used and use often. Websites that we use to create these PowerPoint presentations, and from which you can get these videos yourself. Also, sites where you can buy cool Eclipse gear, like these t-shirts that we're wearing. GreatAmericanEclipse.com has t-shirts. Several places to buy Eclipse glasses. You still might be able to get a shipment in bulk before the eclipse. So those of you who do not have cameras to image that with, you will have hard copies that will pass out to you. Okay. So we're going to summarize what it is we talked about, and then at the very end we'll show you a short video of the 2016 eclipse from Micronesia. So in summary, we started off with defining what is an eclipse. We talked about their frequency and location. Showed you some NASA video animations, also some from Great American Eclipse and timeanddate.com, which is a pretty good website. Show you what an eclipse looks like, some good photographs of the different parts of the sun that will be visible, the path of the eclipse, and again afterwards, if you want to go up and look more closely at the maps up there, you'll see some interesting things about who gets to see the eclipse and who doesn't. What the weather prospects are, they're pretty good here in Oregon, so I'm staying here. Some past eclipses, some past experiences. I'm really, really excited about this. Eye safety, we talked a lot about that. I will say though, if you catch yourself accidentally looking at the partially eclipsed sun without glasses on, because that's easy to do, especially towards the late part of it where almost all of the sun's covered up, it's still not safe. But if you find yourself looking at it, just look away. You know, an exposure of a second or so is not going to damage your eyes. But you don't want to be staring at it for many, many seconds. So if you find yourself looking at the sun without the glasses, just look away and put them And these are the partial phases where you do need the glasses, you do need the filtration. Talked about observing the eclipse, how cameras can be used to telescopes, and I really recommend binoculars. I recommend binoculars for a couple reasons. One is that almost all of us already have a pair. The other is that I think it's the perfect, like 7 power is like the perfect magnification to look at the total solar eclipse, because you're not zoomed in so much that your binoculars are shaking wildly because you're so excited holding them up, looking like that. But it's also wide enough field so that you'll see a lot of the solar corona. But at 7 power, you've got enough magnification where you'll be able to see the prominences, the pink flames around the edge quite well. And I really think that binoculars are the best instrument to use. But again, if you do it during partial phase, you have to have filters in front of the binoculars. But during totality, it's perfectly safe to look at the eclipse with whatever you want. As we say, it's about the brightness of the full moon, and it's as safe to look at as the full moon during totality. Some other activities, some things perhaps to avoid in terms of etiquette. And we did talk about photography, and again, we have a photography class. And where to go for further information. A bunch of cool links where you can look at some stuff that we didn't have time to show you tonight. And then finally, we'll go ahead and start this Micronesia eclipse video. And hopefully this will give you a little impression of the excitement that happens.
Very near the darkest part of the shadow, I see that the crescent is starting to shorten. We're getting very close. Very, very close. I'm sure people at home can hear the crowds and excitement here. We're anticipating a diamond ring.
Oh, a tiny little sliver. Oh, it's really getting dark.
There we go.
Here comes the
Very
shadow.
close.
Diamond ring! There it is.
Diamond ring effect.
Great.
Oh my goodness. That is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Now we see the streamers.
Oh!
They're reaching out into the sky.
The corona is so nice. Look at the lines.
We're getting a really strong streamer on the lower left-hand side.
Oh, wow.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I'm seeing stars. I believe I see Regulus.
Oh, yeah. So that's Venus and Mercury.
Venus and Mercury. We're not seeing other stars right now, but we are seeing Venus and Mercury.
Yeah, the sky has gone dark. It's like night coming on. And the clouds around the horizon are dimly lit with yellowish brown. It's the sunlight's still hitting the distant clouds. Oh, it's dark here.
I see birds flying overhead. Actually, a lot of birds have come out of the trees and they're circling.